affordability and the reliability of energy sources. How to get from talking to doing? That's the big question. So the panel, New Energy Reality, is going to be moderated by Reinis Aboltiņš. Reinis, could you come to the stage with me? Let's just sit down. I mean, a lot of... that's your seat, maybe.
Which seat?
That seat, maybe.
Thank you, Oskars.
I would pretend that I'm your panelist. So how do we do this? So Reini, you are from Public Utilities Commission, is that correct?
That is correct.
So what do you do there?
That's what I do every day, yes.
That every day?
Normally, yes, on Sundays.
Like Saturdays, Sundays?
Especially.
Oh, right. How do we do this? Do I introduce the panelists or you do that?
Please do so. Yes, that would be very kind of you, Oskars.
I thought I had a break, but no. All right, State Secretary of Latvia's Ministry for Climate and Energy, Liga Kurevska. Yes, you can choose the seat.
Liga.
The Deputy Secretary General for Energy and Mineral Resources at Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications for Estonia, Timo Tatar. The person with the longest job title in this conference. Giles Dixon, the CEO of Wind Europe, very short one. I mean the title. Toms Naborgs, we saw him on the stage already, CEO of Latvian Wind Energy Association. And we have one more chair, that is for Avo Karmas, the chairman of the board in Estonian Wind Power Association. I'm leaving, okay?
Right. Well, this is an outstanding panel that we are having here. And I just want to remind everybody, this is going to be the introductory, therefore very high-level panel, where we can cover some of the key aspects that will be later discussed in more detail. And the countdown has started, and I just want to highlight, before giving the floor to your initial interventions, I just want to start with a few points to make. Right, we all know that renewables are good, fossils are bad, so we have to make a transition. We have huge potential. I've heard at least several different figures over the last year when assessing the offshore capacity potential in the Baltic Sea, especially in the Baltic States. I've heard the figure 10 gigawatts, I've heard 13 gigawatts, I've heard even 15 gigawatts and even 20 gigawatts. So obviously this is a huge figure, any of those figures are huge. So then I have to look at the energy portfolios of the Baltic States, and I see three very, very, very different situations. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, very different energy portfolios, different needs for transitioning as well. Estonia has to, phase out oil shale. Latvia has to think about phasing out or at least decreasing the dependency on natural gas. And Lithuania has to be thinking about everything, which it is doing. There's quite a huge challenge. Anyway, I think it's correct to approach, to be looking at the Baltic States as a single energy market, as a single area where there is one bigger energy portfolio which can be utilized, the fruits of which can be utilized by all three Baltic states and beyond, in fact, because interconnections are there. So how do we transition? Is the wind really, especially offshore wind, really the best technology to harness the renewable power from? And is it really feasible? What are the key issues? And how quickly can we do that? So timing, procedures, etc. We are going to speak about regulatory affairs in the second panel, but now I'd like to perhaps address Toms first. Toms, do we really need offshore? I mean, there's plenty of space for onshore as well.
I think the offshore is what you call a long shot. It will take time for it to, materialize. So we're probably talking first projects around 2030. We have to live until that. The consumers need reliable and cheap energy, so the market participants will fill that gap by quicker possibilities, namely solar and some onshore. So in my eyes, the local consumption of Baltic states does not depend on offshore. Offshore is something which would allow us to become an exporter of the energy, and when I say energy, I'm not talking only electricity, I'm talking hydrogen, synthetic fuels, whatnot, because we have clear need for those resources in industrial countries like Germany and Poland. So that's my look that the offshore really is more needed for the broader perspective, looking at the EU-wide level. The local consumption will be covered before first offshore park is cutting the ribbon.
Right, so basically we are looking at changes in energy portfolio, and it looks like it's inevitable. It's just a matter of how we do it and how quickly we do it, how much we do need to invest in that. Liga, do you think that we have what is needed, what is required currently for offshore grid deployment?
I absolutely agree that offshore wind is mainly aimed at exporting. And it's no secret that all three Baltic countries aim to become net energy exporters. And obviously electricity is a fantastic resource that we can export and where we have quite high natural advantage based on our location. Whether everything is ready to bring offshore wind currently into the deployment, I think the obvious answer is no, because if everything were ready, then we would have many wind farms already installed, similarly to other places in Europe. So there is still gap, not only regarding consumption that needs to be filled, but also for regulatory affairs as well as infrastructure to be built. So while we are very much interested and we see very high potential for offshore wind, currently we still work in progress from regulatory point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Liga. Well, Timo, it would make sense to have a comment from you as well. I mean, well, basically, is it export, is it domestic energy portfolio? Is this a dichotomy, in fact?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So clearly, wind is the largest renewable source in our region, and I think however you look at clearly the wind will become a major player in our energy portfolios. And but it is also obvious that we start from picking the lowest hanging fruits, which is onshore wind, which means that once we reach to offshore wind, then let's see whether we are still, needed for our domestic needs or this is only for export purposes. But clearly, if you look, the demand forecasts in our region and let's say Nordic region, then I'm quite confident that eventually we need to grasp all the wind there is. So to make it work, to really make the green transition happening. So and we are working, at least in Estonia, and I'm sure that my Latvian and Lithuanian colleagues are doing the same, to really make this vision happen. That we are having all the right legislation in place to really let this potential, which is right now only a potential, to become a reality. That if there is a business case, then we are the best location where you can utilize the business case.
Thank you, Timo. Aavo, is there a business case? Enlighten us.
Yeah, there's always this business case. Hi, good morning. Yeah, I mean. Things just don't happen. I mean, that it is not so that the offshore wind will come as a natural way. I mean, I think that in order to create the business case, I mean, okay, let me start from that end. That basically we don't have any, as we know, we don't have experience in the Baltic States how to build offshore wind farms. So that's for sure. If we want to have, and I'm sure we want to have offshore wind farms in the Baltic countries, we need to build and construct and develop those offshore parks together with foreign companies. And in order to attract foreign companies here in our region, we have to have really a clear message that foreign investors are welcome here.
What would that mean?
That would, yeah, I just explain. I mean, that would first mean that there is aligned message through politicians, through officials, different stakeholders, that the offshore is needed for our energy security, for our energy supply, and so on. The second thing is that actually our regulatory environment is transparent. It is a long term. We have set out very clearly our long-term actions, the commitments the stakeholders are ready to take. So this is something which will attract investors to come here. And if this is so, I'm quite sure that actually the offshore is becoming more and more competitive in order also to create a business case as such. But the things just don't happen.
Right. Well, although it's somewhere in the air, you know, but still, well, there is a night and day cycle. We are going to have wind.
Yeah, guys. I mean, but we have like only 7 years to go, right?
Right. We do have, but yes. So the changes have to happen swiftly.
We all know that this is so short time in energy sector. Yeah.
But in theory, the business case is there. Still.
Of course, the business case is there. We just have to see that what are the kind of inputs to make it even more competitive. So that I think that the main question obviously is that how to maximize or minimize actually, the levelized cost of energy for offshore wind, and as a technology as such is also kind of we seem to see the prices are decreasing. So I think it's becoming more and more competitive.
Right. Well, thank you, Avo. And Giles is rightly grabbing the mic. Giles, from the perspective of the European Wind Energy Association, which is a very important lobby for wind energy industry in Europe, and therefore also for renewables, do you see, when looking at the Baltic states, do you see that we have things in place, or do you see missing something if compared with other areas where offshore wind has been developed already?
You have a lot of things in place. A lot of good things are happening in Latvia and the two other Baltic states, and it's absolutely right. The low-hanging fruit is onshore wind. None of the three Baltic states are self-sufficient in electricity today. And electricity demand and consumption is only going to grow with the electrification of transport, heating, and industrial processes. So, boy, you need those new onshore wind farms ASAP. Minister Tudors, it's very good to hear what you said about the simplification of permitting rules and procedures in Latvia. And we all heard what Commissioner Simpson had to say about this earlier. The new EU rules, which make it much easier to permit new onshore and offshore wind farms, overriding public interest for the expansion of renewables, the population-based approach to biodiversity protection, deciding on all of the permits within that 2-year deadline. This really helps. On the permitting, it's crucial also to digitalize the permitting processes. Timo, you've made excellent progress in Estonia on this already. At the annual Wind Europe event next week in Copenhagen, two of our members, Amazon and Accenture, will launch a new digital tool which public authorities can use to help them manage and streamline how they handle permit applications more effectively. And we'd be very happy to talk to any of you about that tool and to help you introduce it in your respective permitting authorities. Of course, this year is the key year really to give yourselves the basis to deliver on the low-hanging fruit for onshore wind and to map out how you do the offshore wind, because this is the year that, as you have noted, you will be revising your national energy and climate plans. One final observation, if I may, Renis, on offshore wind. You have huge potential to further develop your supply chain. You have excellent port potential in Liepāja with their 3 separate gates, fantastic infrastructure there compares extremely favorably to other ports around the Baltic Sea. And of course, with the new EU state aid guidelines, it is much easier for you to use public funds to support the development of the wind energy supply chain here in Latvia. Thank you.
Thank you, Giles. You rightly pointed out towards the role of auxiliary, maybe we can say auxiliary businesses like port services, etc. Right. So basically, I can see that the willingness is there. It's both formal and informal. There is business case. What is needed is open door policy. It looks like the offshore wind energy is going to predominantly serve for export purposes. We're still a bit far from that. Despite the fact that it's going to perhaps allegedly serve mostly for export purposes, most likely it's going to be a significant resource to fill in the gaps in our national energy portfolios. I'm not sure if the onshore wind will be able to cover the needs, but there is one important aspect, whether we are speaking of onshore or offshore, it's the grid capacity. Who would like to say a few words? Do you think we have the capacity currently? Because I've heard varying opinions to be true. Somebody, Liga, Timo, let's begin with you.
Yeah. So clearly, if you look the theoretical potential of wind energy in our region, then clearly the grid as it stands today is a bottleneck. So no question about that. But when it comes to Estonia, then we see that to cover our own 100% target, so obviously all countries should have 100% target nowadays. So the grid can manage that. So the question is, if and when, and surely we will become a energy exporting country, having the potential we are having, then clearly the grid will become a major bottleneck. And this is one of our pillars of the energy policy, to really be have an open door policy here as well, that we are really one of the countries who are promoting continuously the offshore grid developments, the idea behind that and all that. We are developing also another interconnection towards Finland. The fourth interconnection towards Latvia is in works. And as I said, we are also looking at the offshore grid. So clearly we have realized that in order to grasp at least some of the potential there is, actually the potential is even higher, we need to really look seriously to the networks as well. So, but we can make the first steps already now without having a big headache of the network. So the network is supplying 100% electricity right now to the consumer. Why on earth we shouldn't do it when the electricity is renewable? Clearly, with the renewables, the volumes are bigger because of the fluctuations. But all in all, the network in Estonia can handle 100%. The challenge is how to go further, and clearly the intention is to go further.
Yeah, there are questions incoming already regarding balancing, right? So you rightly mentioned that, but Liga, you were grabbing the mic, so.
Yes, obviously also in Latvia, we can not only cover 100% of our consumption with our existing grids, we can easily cover twice or thrice the amount. However, to become a truly exporting nation and to ensure that we can use this potential that we have, similarly to Estonia, we have to, and Lithuania, we have to find new ways how to interconnect. And that has been one of the key aspects also we have been working on, to find, firstly, to define the Baltic region as a common region, to invite investors and to show us that we are very open to offshore, to onshore, to foreign investments, to national investments, to show that we are the new place for development. Secondly, there's usually three types of barriers when we look at the offshore development or onshore development. Firstly, the bottleneck is available financing. If there is not good business case, then there is not much interest. Currently, there is business case, as we heard. So then usually the next issue is grid capacity. And as everybody here, I imagine, knows, in all three countries, there is overbook capacity in the grids. There is more interest than the grid can take in, and then we have to understand what is the reasonable approach, how to manage it. How can we take this scarce resource that we have and use it in most efficient way? And when we will solve this issue, then the next one probably will be the auxiliary services, because at least that's what other countries in Europe is facing, that there is the capacity of the ports, the availability of sufficient infrastructure to support offshore wind development. So hopefully during this year we can manage to move from this second barrier to move into this third one and start solving the auxiliary services to make sure that really by the 2032, 2035 we can see new offshore wind developments.
Thank you, Toms. A comment on the grid capacity, right?
I would like to add a little bit broader perspective. I think the local thinking fits well to what the representatives of both country ministries who regulate this business are talking about. I mean, until 2030 also seems comfortable, we'll cover our own needs, the grid is there. But this conference is talking about something more ambitious, more regional, but we're talking EU-wide thing here. The offshore in Baltic States has a different purpose. It should serve as the energy source to cover the needs of the Europe in general, meaning the closest markets, the consumption points, in my eyes, Poland and Germany. And the Baltic States, in order to utilize that, should be the front runners and the loudest advocates and very active in encouraging EU-wide discussions regarding the supergrid developments, and should be very actively behind it, pushing that, because we can only utilize this 15 gigawatts in Latvian case, 7 to 10 gigawatts in Estonian case, up to 5 gigawatts in Lithuanian case, if we can transport that electricity towards the consumption points. And it's a long shot, it's a long-term process, but we need start talking about it now, we need to start planning now, and we need to be behind it now. And the Baltic States should be the ones who are the super active ones.
Great that you mentioned it, because we are going to have a dedicated panel to getting connected to the grid, so which is absolutely key for. I mean, we can stop talking about offshore wind if there is no connections and no grids. Giles.
Thank you, Renes. Wind turbines already offer voltage control and frequency control. They're already good for balancing the electricity system. We're increasingly installing small battery units inside wind farms. We're still working on the inertia, but we'll get there. Now, one small observation, if I may, on offshore grids. It's fantastic that the two of you are working on L-Wind together. It makes sense to do hybrid offshore wind farms as well as the point-to-point offshore wind farms, because you can pool your generation and transmission assets. That saves money, it saves space in the sea, and of course it improves energy flows across the region. But you need a business case both for the TSOs involved and for the offshore wind farm developers. If either one of them does not have a business model, those hybrid offshore wind farms just will not happen. L-Wind will not happen. Now, the European Commission have very helpfully included in their new market design proposals a model which will give a business case both to the wind farm developers and to the TSOs. It's called the Transmission Access Guarantee. It's part of the new market design legislation that the Commission have proposed, and we would encourage you strongly to support this proposal now in the Council of Ministers in Brussels.
Just doing some lobbying here. Well, what a better place from the stage. Thank you, Giles, for this comment. Avo, do you think the cooperation so far between the industry and other relevant stakeholders, like, for example, TSOs, has been, well, cooperative, let's say, or is it competitive or cooperative?
Yeah, that's a good one. Before I answer to that question, I was just listening what was said before, and I just want to maybe highlight my opinion that I still think that the offshore, yes, I mean the offshore wind farms, they are huge projects. I mean the output is really huge, but I think that there must be a good mix both of offshore and onshore for each of the countries. So that I think that if we say that offshore is only for export purposes, I think that this, to my mind, this is incorrect. So I think that offshore also has a really important role to play in the domestic supply as well. But coming back to your questions regarding the cooperation or a competition, I wouldn't say that it is a competition. I really hope that we see more and more cooperation actually, and as I said at the beginning in my keynote, that I really do hope that the TSOs are also among those stakeholders who say that offshore is needed in the Baltics, so that this is important for our energy security for a future. And what I'm personally expecting is that there will be a kind of agreed common action plan for not only till 2030. I think it is maybe too short look. I mean, but that going forward, so that all market participants know that what is a long-term agreed action plan, and in order to set or align their actions according to what TSOs have been saying.
Yeah, thank you. There is actually, I mean, this question of balancing, right? So we are speaking about enormous capacities here. So the question of balancing inevitably pops up every time we are speaking about significant wind energy capacities. So we are also, we understand that the future belongs to the hybrid systems, right? It's not just, there's no silver or gold, whatever, bullet. Wind, I mean, it's good per se, but it's better if it's combined with storage possibilities or possibility to produce hydrogen or whatever you can produce, what the technology allows today or tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. So still, and there have been questions also dropping in the mailbox regarding the balance. Do you think that, say, we are looking at 10 gigawatts of capacity within 10 years of time, right, from now on? How do you see the balancing exercise here? Any one of you might I don't know, Avo maybe, or Tuomas, or Giles, and or Liga, you can comment immediately, right? Go ahead.
I'll start. So intermittent generation is called intermittent for a reason. So historically it was absolutely uncontrollable and non-dispatchable, and you need a dispatchable generation to balance it. As Giles already mentioned, obviously newer technologies allows some level of dispatch, some level of accumulation that can help with system balancing. But when we look from physics point of view, traditionally you would expect that when you increase intermittent generation, you also need to increase the balancing reserves. So for those windless, sunless nights, there must be either accumulation solutions that can get them through, and we have Kruonis in Baltics, we have hydro in Baltics, quite significant, and we have existing infrastructure that use fossil fuels but can be used as base loads if situation calls for it. We see similar transition also in Denmark, for example, where also when there is really insufficient amount of electricity, the old cogeneration plants are also used. So while balancing is certainly a topic that needs to be addressed and needs to be looked at, specifically how you ensure the base loads in case the accumulation solutions are insufficient, I think Baltics are pretty well prepared and I wouldn't say that ability to balance, taking into account that we will be developing quite a sort of new generation type of wind farms, which are already much more better adjusted for grid needs. I wouldn't say that that would be the major issue. It certainly needs work. As you already mentioned, nothing happens without effort. You need to build and prepare and plan, but I wouldn't say that balancing is going to be the major issue, specifically knowing how well connected we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Who is willing to comment next? I mean, I have plenty of questions that I'd like to allow you to react to this. Oh, I mean, all right, Liga, let's get back to what you said. Right, balancing. So we can actually ensure physically balancing, right? And but those who are slightly skeptical, let's say, about these intermittent generation sources, they say, well, you're now backpedaling because you're referring to fossil fuel power plants as the balancing act, right, as the main actors, or aren't you?
As a solution that exists already, obviously we must take that into account, both in Lithuania and Latvia, and also in Estonia. When there is business case for those plants, I imagine that it makes sense to use the existing infrastructure.
What about price impacts then?
Your question is absolutely correct. So how can we make competitive pricing for resources that work for a few hours a year? And that is one of the topics that needs to be addressed. But when we look from technical perspective and system security point of view, which was the essence of the question, I don't think that that is the main issue.
Okay.
Solving monetary aspects is much easier than solving technical ones, because technical does not really yield to regulation, does it?
Great, great, thank you. Timo.
If I can comment, then I think one thing we as policymakers learned from last year is that well, those dispatchable power plants, which sometimes are not needed for months, maybe for years, are sometimes very much needed. And I think our work as a policymakers is, on one hand, to make sure that they are needed less and less. So a fossil power plant which is not working, guess what, is not emitting anything. So, but of course the challenge is how to keep it available. So this is clearly something which we have to tackle in a European market design sooner or later. So because this question is rising up. So
marginal pricing, right?
Yeah. So countries are already talking about capacity markets or capacity remuneration mechanisms or strategic reserves. So we need there clearly some sort of common guidance or better guidance from European Commission, because from that perspective, you know, a fossil power plant is not an enemy of renewables. Vice versa, provided that the fossil power plant is, you know, staying on standby, not emitting 95% of towers. So I think this is needed for some time. This is, I think, for the society quite a cheap insurance policy until we are having, you know, have figured out the technologies which helps us to bridge those gaps, those famous cold, windy, not without wind and cold and without sun, you know, nights, everyone talking in our region. So hopefully soon we will see technologies over there as well, battery storages and all that. Clearly also a bit more flexible demand side, but until then, until we reach there, you know, we have to make sure that those capacities which are not running are still available.
I'd be happy to develop on demand response, but let's leave that for the moment being. But Toms, from the business perspective, or industry's perspective rather.
Exactly. So every problem, you can look at it as a problem or as an opportunity. So the business people will try to look for opportunities here. And we know that there are some initiatives in Baltic States to work on a large-scale storage. We know that there are some ports seriously looking into hydrogen. So I would focus, not see a problem, but see it as an opportunity. And I agree with Aavo, don't get me wrong, I don't think that everything should be exported. The excess energy and cheap energy will provide ample opportunities for Baltic business to grow into different sectors, being synthetic fuels, hydrogen, whatnot, and also large-scale industries which need cheap power will benefit. This cheap, abundant electricity will set a playfield for large investments also to come into Baltic states and create a lot of jobs. So I would say that this is a great opportunity, not a problem.
Right. Well, Aavo, you were referred to. So from the business point of view or industry point of view, right, so we have grids. The grids presumably are able to swallow, at least for foreseeable future, swallow what is going to come, say, in 10 years roughly, right? So plus minus. Or what is actually the time horizon? If you have the door open, do you see that you can, what is the next step? The door is open, okay, the next step, is it procurement procedures? Is it the clarity, political clarity, procurement, or everything all at once and everywhere?
Actually, yeah. I mean, if we want to develop a offshore wind fast, and I'm really happy to see, at least as far as Estonia is concerned, but also same goes to Latvia and Lithuania, that those initiatives which have been taken by politicians, you know, to shorten the permitting time and the stuff like that, this is really well welcomed. But at the same time, that means for industry or for developers, that means that we need to kind of put quite a bit of funds into our development expenses in a very short time. We need to, you know, come up with our technical designs also in a very short time. Of course, I think that market participants are also looking for some kind of revenue security mechanism. If those are also in place, and they need to be it. So actually, what I'm trying to say is that during a very short time, all the puzzle pieces must be in place in order to make a final investment decision, and after that, it takes only to the construction of a wind farm.
Yeah. May I just follow up very quickly? Actually, it's not only on the list of the questions here that have come in, but there's a question really whether wind industry is ready to develop offshore wind without CFDs or a contract for difference system. Do you think it's, how feasible? How are you looking at that?
What we have seen so far, at least I'm talking about Estonia, maybe on behalf of NFI Green, sorry, but we have currently 6 wind farms, onshore wind farms with total capacity around 500 megawatts under construction, and all those wind farms we have developed on a basis of power purchase agreements which have been signed with different counterparties for up to 10 years. Now, if one is saying that it is possible to that PPAs can something or the offshore wind can be developed, I'm not actually a true believer of that, because if we take into account the size of our countries and size of our businesses, we see that there are not so much demand in order to sign a long-term power purchase agreements for offshore capacity. And you know, when we're talking about revenue security, of course, we're mostly talking about CFD, mostly, I think, also two-sided CFD, which is, I think that we should not take it as a government support. I think that this is a win-win solution for everybody, also for consumers. And if once the investors also have a kind of a revenue security in place, they can lower their financial costs, which is a substantial part of LCOE, in order to offer the maximum lowest price for consumers in longer run. So that's why I think that yes, I mean, this revenue security mechanism, CFD, is something which is expected by different market players.
Giles, thank you, Aavo, for this. And Giles, just to build up on what Aavo said, From the experience of the European Union or Western European countries, say North Sea area or around Denmark, what does dominate there? Is it CFDs, PPAs, mixed approach? What's there on the table? What should we be looking at when we are looking for an example? Or shall we be looking at examples at all?
If you look across the whole of Europe, both at the auction models for offshore wind and now onshore wind, the two-sided CFD is the dominant model. It is an excellent model, as Arvo has just said, and it is now the model that the European Commission is promoting, recommending through its new market design proposals. Now, it's very good, Liga, that you are working on your auction design for offshore and you're working very quickly on it. There's one additional point of common sense that I think we would wish to share with you. You'll be looking at other countries' experience, other countries' models. Be guided by those models that have shown that they work, that have been used several times already. And I'm thinking here in particular of the UK model. They invented the two-sided CFD, but also of the Dutch model, now using non-price criteria very successfully. These are models that have been shown to work. There are wind farms being developed on the back of those models. Be guided by those models. Perhaps resist the temptation to be guided by models that may have been agreed politically, but haven't yet been used. For example, the new model that was legislated for in Germany last year, or any new emerging models in Denmark. Be guided by those models that have been tried and tested.
Let's not steal the discussion from the next panel, which is going to be more detailed on the regulatory framework, etc. But still, Liga, well, Giles revealed that you are working on something and working fast. Just a little, you could just raise a little bit of curtain without stealing the debate for the next panel.
Yes, Giles is absolutely correct that when you're starting a bit late, the benefit of that is that you can learn from others. And that's what we have been doing. And I'm very thankful because I have had individual meetings with investors, with other country representatives, and they have been so kind and shared their experience. And that's what we've been gathering. Though I agree that we usually should look at things that actually work, not things that hopefully works, I think one aspect we must not forget at this point is that the context has really changed and shifted. So some models that might have worked in the previous context where the renewable developments were mostly driven by state aid, they have to be reevaluated in the context where there is more clear business development and more clear market. Though on the topic whether we should look at things that have shown results versus things that might show results, well, probability-wise, one can bring you results better. So on the topic whether CFD is the best choice, I think that's an open debate. In Latvia, a form of CFD has had limited success previously, and we have some history with that. I know that in Lithuania, CFD is a topic that is looked at the moment. At this point, no decision has been made on this topic at the moment. We are not currently creating a CFD regulation as of now. Thank you.
Right, yeah, Timo, chip in.
Yeah, if I comment as well. So I'm clearly also representative of this skeptical bunch of CFDs. So, and I think one thing everyone learned from last year's energy crisis, I think it was a really good exercise. Everyone, got overnight an expert how the day-ahead market works. Is that the day-ahead market delivers you brilliantly a price in a range between -500 euros per megawatt hour until 4,000 euros megawatt hour. If you are running an industry which is energy intensive, then I wouldn't suggest you to run this lottery every day at 1 p.m. and see what is your next day electricity price. So I think what we learned, and I hope also the large energy-intensive businesses learned, is that it makes sense to fix your important input like electricity for 7, for 10, for 15 years. You can sleep better, and it is also very useful for offshore wind, for renewables to finance their projects. So without taking in the regulatory risk coming from state support schemes. So I am clearly advocating, first of all, those PPAs between large consumers and generators. Does it work? Yes, it works. So you look Finland. Finland is one of the markets which is still booming. So last year, more than 2,000 megawatts of onshore wind was built up there without any CFDs, only PPAs, only based on fully functioning market. So, but of course, Finns industry is known.
It's a very special market.
Known for how to buy electricity. So there is also well-known Mankala scheme, how they finance their nuclear. But I think this is something where our industries and companies, and why not also households, should learn and look how we with our individual choices can help the renewable electricity to become reality. So because the double-sided CFD might look very elegant way, but again, an example from this Monday. So this weekend, Olkiluoto 3 started finally, 14 years after the initial state. But well, it started, but on Monday, the electricity price in our region was 120 euros or something. So then I looked, what is the reason behind? So there is 5,000 megawatts of wind installed in Finland. Only 28 on that day was generating. And that got me thinking that, if this would be the double-sided CFD, then who would pay, those revenues?
There's a difference,
so,
right? Yes.
Is it only those 28 megawatts out of 5,000 megawatts who are then, paying those revenues everyone is advertising? So I guess not.
I'll let you expand during the next panel, but we have roughly 4.5 minutes, and I see 2 mics. One in Tuom's hand and the other one in Giles' hand. Tuoms, perhaps you could begin and then we continue with Giles.
Yeah, just a practical remark. In the Latvian context, the state support being fed in, or CFDs, whatever, has a very bad political connotation. So there is nobody in political scene brave enough to bring it up. So we have internally discussed it in our offshore group within Latvia and Wind Energy Association. All the big players are part of that group. That I don't think that politically it is feasible at this point in time. So we are currently more looking into finding other ways how to de-risk it, but we don't dare to ask new minister to go out as his first task for suicide mission, ask for some public support. Just a side comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuoms, for the comment. And Giles, last but not least.
Corporate PPAs are essential for all the reasons that you have outlined, Timo. And it's fantastic they exist. And as many new PPAs were agreed last year with very high wholesale prices, the developers were taking a hit because they were locking into revenues much lower than the market price. But still, as many PPAs were signed last year as had been signed in the previous year when the wholesale prices were much lower. But industrial demand will only ever be a certain share of total electricity demand. Yeah? Not all the electricity consumers are able to sign PPAs or will want to sign PPAs. So there needs to be something else in the mix. And it's precisely for that reason that the EU is proposing this model of the two-sided CFD and, for many other projects, the corporate PPA. And there will be some projects, we have some already in the North Sea, that are taking both PPA revenue and CFD revenue.
Great. So it actually does work, right? So there are ways how how to deal with this, so that the costs do not have to be socialized in any way, right? Okay, so because that is another big debate. What should be the model? Whether, for example, the model for connecting to the grid, shall it be everything included in the procurement, or shall it be socialized? Let's leave it for later. It's of course easier for the developer then, but on the other hand, then it's quite unpredictable from the public point of view, but it's very predictable from the business point of view. So it's just I just build it there, build the capacity, and do it. So there are different positions you can be looking at it from. So right, we have still 2 minutes to go. There's actually one really interesting question here, which I could call a high-level question. For people less probably familiar with how the construction and all the construction cycle of offshore wind power farm functions, where are you going to get the labor force and everything that is needed technically and in terms of hands in the Baltic States if you want to? I mean, 10 gigawatts of power, right? So Liga is grabbing already. Liga, go ahead. You were the first one, and you have roughly 1 minute.
Yes, that's what I was reflecting on a bit earlier in the discussion. I'm very happy to move towards this issue and to solve that one, because that shows that we are closer to having real developments. At the moment, it is an issue we have to think from today. It's both vocational training, it is availability of not only people but also capital. We have, as you mentioned, very good infrastructure in ports that needs to be delivered further. Also, we probably can't transport windmills from China to Latvia. There has to be some sort of industry developed around it, and that will require effort, and it will require support, and it will require also, I wouldn't say governmental oversight, I would say support from the government and discussion with industry. But I would say that typically we have to solve grid question and grid availability and how we see the system as a whole. What are the new interconnectors with other countries? How can we become an exporter? What is the roadmap? And then we look at the development. Because if we don't have enough place or enough business opportunities, then unfortunately, the third barrier will not be an issue. So it's going to be an issue, but it's something I'm looking as an opportunity and as something for the next step. Thank you.
Right, you are. So with this, I would wish to say optimistic approach. I'd like to finish the very quick panel that we had here. The time was not dragging. Definitely, I think it flied past, but I'm looking forward to having Timo and Liga in the next panel as well. And I would like to thank all the panelists with a round of applause.